Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Standards Committee for 27th of March. I'm John Bailey, Somerset Councillor for Martock. Welcome to everybody around the room. I'll just go around and ask you to introduce yourselves in a moment. I think I'll do that now, actually, starting with David. Would you like to introduce yourself? Mine. Right on button.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Hemsley, co-opted member.
Good afternoon, Scott Waldridge, Head of Governance and Democratic Services.
David Clark, Service Director and Monitoring Officer.
Brian Smutter, Councillor for Bridgewater South.
Hugh Davis, Councillor for Watchet and Stagosi Division.
Frances Nicholson, member for Dalton and Exmoor.
Thank you, everybody. And I think we have, apologies, I'll go through in a moment. I think we have Paul Hooper online, the other co-opted member. Are you there,
Yes,
Paul?
good afternoon. Good afternoon, Paul here. Paul Hooper,
And
independent.
Owen
member on the
Martin
board.
online as well. Is that, I can see you, Martin?
Good afternoon. Thanks very much, John. Nice to see you.
Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Martin Dimmery. I apologise for not being able to be with you this afternoon. I'm Councillor for Frome West.
The agenda and papers have been published on the Council's website in advance of the meeting. Could I kindly request that members and officers refer to the page numbers for the agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information? Today's meeting will be run using a hybrid format with committee members and key officers physically present in Dean House. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific items or observe. The Council will be making a recording of the meeting to assist with the recording of our discussions. Further highlight, please only speak at my invitation. Switch on the microphone on the desk, which is the right button that I found now. Say your name before speaking, and please turn off the microphone after speaking. And for those online via Teams, please turn off the microphone and cameras we're not speaking to reduce the strain on the bandwidth. Apologies for absence. I have Robin Horton. Sorry. Stephanie, is it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for looking after us, Stephanie.
That's okay. Thank you. And thank you and apologies that I'm online, but it was the best I could do with a poorly child. But apart from the apologies that you've already heard from Councillor Dimmery, you've also had an apology from Robin Horton.
Thank you, Stephanie. Declaration of interest. Is there any declarations of interest that aren't already listed anywhere else? Take that as a thank you, Alan. Moving on to item 4, the action sheet and minutes from the previous meeting. Would you like to approve the minutes for the meeting held on the 24th of January as a correct record? Are we in favour? Just show hands. It's gone off again. Oh, right. Okay. How much didn't you hear? All of it? Okay, we'll start again.
Could you start that bit again, please, Chair? We didn't hear online.
Okay. I I was just going through the action sheet from the 24/1/24, Stephanie.
Okay.
So picking up the items one by one, and I'll identify those that are on the agenda, so we'll pick them up under the agenda item.
Mhm.
Firstly, a review of committee and subcommittee membership. That's been looked at by P2. That's on the agenda. Update on recruitment of an additional cooperative member. That's on the agenda. Qualitative response to survey for Q5. That will be coming under the P2 report. Discuss and feedback the group's thoughts on improving response levels to survey and uptake of code of conduct. Again, under P2. Confirmation of whether point 9.6 of Somerset Council's code of conduct was included in the model code of conduct provided for city, town and parish councils to be given to members. And we've had a confirmation of that from the MO, I think. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that 9.6 was omitted from the draft or the template code of conduct that was given to parish councils. It was deemed to be superfluous in terms of a £50 guide for gifts and hospitality, so it was omitted. That doesn't stop them introducing it themselves. It was just a template, but for the purposes of the template, it wasn't included.
Okay, so you'll log that, Stephanie, please. Service Director to share with union reps an update on an update committee. I don't think that's coming later on the agenda, David, is it? Unless I'm mistaken.
No, I don't believe it is, and I believe it's just it's a low priority in terms of the wider transformation work that's going on at the moment with the authority. So it's unfortunately it's something that's going to take a few months to get back onto the agenda as business as usual, while the engagement with the unions is focused on the wider council transformation work.
Okay, that's understandable. So we'll keep that on the action sheet. And individual experience to be used to test drive. That's coming forward under the report of P1. Code of conduct complaints. That's on the agenda, and reporting to be reviewed after 6 months. Again, P1, and the annual reports on the agenda. So that really covers all that we've got on the action sheet. Thank you very much. And moving on to the annual report of the Standards Committee, item 5 on the agenda. The item is to consider the draft annual report for submission to Council's annual general meeting in May 2024. Recommendation that committee comment on the draft annual report set out in Appendix 1 for submission to the Council's annual general meeting in May 2024. Are there any comments on the report to full council? Anyone?
So the team on priority 1, I think, were the original team. Right, it didn't include Francis. The list of names.
The priority 1 should include Francis.
No, but on the report it didn't.
I think David is saying that my name wasn't on there. I didn't, of course, spot that, did I?
Chairman, in fact, throughout this report, you're referring to Councillor Norman Cavell. You should be referring to Councillor Francis Nicholson throughout your annual report.
Thank you. That's a blue. Thank you, Alan. Did you pick that one up, Stephanie?
I did, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the report to go forward for the next full council? Are we all in favour? Just show of hands, please. We'll change your name to Mike, shall we? Right, moving on to item 6, register of gifts and hospitality. Pages 25 to 28. If there's anything you wish to refer to, please refer to the pages themselves. David, Scott, would you like to present the report?
And this is the 6 monthly report, which comes through to the committee. You remember the previous one in autumn of last year. Effectively, you'll see in Appendix A, that covers all of the relevant declarations that we have received from our 110 members for the period.
Thank you, Scott. Comments from other members? Alan?
Thank you, Chair. None of them are recorded as having been accepted or rejected. And that we have asked for before. And actually looking at them, I suspect the only one that might be a declaration as a result of the person being a member of the council was actually the first one. The rest of them, I suspect, are nothing to do with actually being a member of the council. Also, Councillor Mike Hewitson hasn't declared a value for the trip to London, nor has Hazel Priory Sankey declared a value. That would be useful, and I think if they were to be as members of the council, then these acceptances or rejections, then I think we do need the value. But as I say, I think only the first one is possibly stretching it a bit as a member of the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. So your queries about generally about the value has been in there, but also specifically about a couple of items. Scott, would you like to comment on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, we can take those away, certainly in terms of observations and look at areas in which to improve. But I mean, this is the format of the register that we've been reporting. I know we've had comments already from the committee in terms of areas for improvement, so we can pick all of those up as part of areas for improvement going forward.
Are you happy that we do that, Alan?
Provided we can put a time limit on it of, say, 6 months.
Sorry,
Provided we can put a time limit on it of 6 months.
to have those.
To have those included, yes, Chair.
Okay, well, I think if we look at when we look at the action plan and the work programme, the group that's responsible for that, which I think is P2, can pick those things up at the same time before our next meeting. Any other comments? So, Francis, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought we had asked for accepted or not already to have been on the reporting form, but we'll go back and look at that. My question was picking up very much what Alan said. Why would we, as a council, be interested in somebody going to a National Association of Pharmacists dinner? Why would that be relevant to, and therefore why would it be an appropriate declaration? Well, let's not have people declaring stuff they don't need to, that's not relevant. Or is it the person's private decision and they just decide what they are going to add, even if it's not relevant at all? Or what? It just feels, it doesn't feel, I mean, I can see, yes, might well be asked to give them tickets to a Christmas service because you're the councillor, but or go to the local Indian for its opening, but I don't understand the ones that are not Somerset ones.
I can comment from a personal perspective. If I'm not sure, I tend to declare it, and sometimes I do that by phone just to check, and sometimes I just put the form in. Fine, yeah, I'm just giving my view for the moment, Francis. We'll pass over for an officer view, please.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's up to the individual councillors to what they declare, but I think there's a balance to be struck, isn't there, as to providing some guidance as to whether or not it's appropriate to declare the gift, so we can take that forward and ensure that if it is dubious, if it is a personal matter, then we don't include it, and we make that inquiry before, or we make that inquiry before including it.
Question, Francis. Thank you. Hugh, just before I go there, I can't actually see the names of people up on the screen. but there's somebody got a hand up.
Yeah, John, it's me, Paul. I
Okay,
would
so
completely
Paul, I'll come back to you in a moment, Hugh. Go to Paul first.
I would completely agree with Alan and Francis. I do not think that, Councillor Mike Hewitson is appropriate to even be listed. It's nothing to do with council, and if it's only council, not personal business, that needs to be on it. So I would wholeheartedly agree that definition needs to be changed a bit so that we don't get things like this which we don't need.
Thank you, Paul. On to you.
Ties in what I was going to say, actually, Chair, why we need to know that they've been to a function, whether they were representing the council. I, for one, I go regularly to the Sports Association, Plainfields, which I was a member of, but I still go for it. But if you were claiming, then you've got a bona fide reason for claiming your mileage. If you're not a member of that committee, you can't. So if you get invited to a function and you decide you're going to claim your petrol or diesel for going, then you should declare it.
I'm going to let David have his first crack at the whip.
I was just going to say that anything that could lead to a conflict of interest in their decision making as a councillor should be disclosed. So, even if where we talked about things, all these incidents being accepted, if you decline something because you know that it could impact on a planning decision or a decision that is being made in council, or it could lead you to lead to a conflict of interest, then surely that is what has to be disclosed. It's things that can lead to a conflict of interest in your role as a councillor. And that's fairly straightforward, unless there was some interest that around the pharmacy angle here that we don't know about. So it's not appropriate to have, that should fall outside this reporting realm.
Thank you, David.
But maybe there's a reason.
I'll just go to Francis. Alan, come to you.
And I was going to say much the same thing. If we're interested in something which might influence the way people vote or make decisions, I think is what we, and if receipt of the award of Independent Prescriber of the Year is going to affect the way he votes on a council decision, then obviously we'd need to know about it. But unless we have he has a role, then it doesn't seem reasonable, and it seems awful that I'm picking on the one particular example. But I just don't think we should, we should have here people saying, well, I did this, so I better write it in, because it just gums up the works and obscures ones that we might really want to know about. That's my work.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Alan.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, looking at the Mike Hewitson ones, he declares on his declaration, although I do not have any direct contracts with Somerset Council, I do provide NHS pharmaceutical services to one care home in Somerset. He's also a member and faculty fellow of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. He's a director of he's just being extra careful, I think. And I congratulate him on that, for being extra careful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. David, do you have another comment?
Can I just ask a couple of questions on the spreadsheets? Some of the reasons given, that some were dismissed, but they seem to have received a written apology. So if they were dismissed because they were, sorry, wrong item, sorry. Oh yeah, sorry.
I was going to seek clarification there for a moment.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're still sticking with the members' gifts and hospitality register. I think what I'm going to propose is that it comes back to P2 to have a look at, and I'll give my own thoughts about this, which obviously is related to what I've said already, that when I'm not sure, I tend to take the sort of the easy way of checking it out, either on the telephone or verbally, or by putting it down here, and then it doesn't get put forward. Just taking Francis's comment about the noise, there are only 5 in here, and so I don't think the noise is too high to miss any. But that's only my own views, and I put those forward for P2 to have a look at the situation going forward. I would encourage people, if they're not sure, to just take the high moral ground and to put forward for checking. I think, but I do take your point that we don't want to miss out those that are not putting forward their on this register, particularly because we won't know of them. These are the people we know of. The people who don't come forward, we won't know. So my proposal is this comes back to P2 to look at the issues that we've talked about. Alan was worried about it being less than 6 months. That would be before the next meeting, so that should take account of that. And to review the issues that have come out of the conversation we've had today. Okay, Stephanie? Thank you. So perhaps I ought to say, so we accept that item as it is, but we'll take that review forward for the future. Is that fair review? Thank you. Moving on to item 7, Code of Conduct's complaint quarterly update. David, you're going to present this report, I think.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this is our 4th quarter, albeit it had to be penned in the middle of March before we'd finished this month. So great to say there has been another couple of complaints come in since the report was published. But just in terms of that trend line, you will see there's a little bit of a spike in February in terms of the numbers jumping up to 13, although it was only 7 incidents, so we had multiple complaints about similar incidents. So taking that into account, the numbers are remaining steady after that initial spike that we had back in May of last year. So you'll see the trend line is generally around the half dozen mark, the 5 to 6 mark that we're receiving moving forward, and that seems to be pretty steady. The report just then goes on to talk about the measures of performance that we've had, that they always touch on. So the acknowledgements, so we're up at 85% over the year, albeit Q4 we're looking in isolation, we're at 100%. And substantive response, again, we're starting to bring that number up as well. After I think we were just caught on the hop a little bit with the volume of complaints in the early part of the year. But now we're at a bit more of a steady state. We've got our processes and procedures in place that we're meeting that acknowledgement target, not just acknowledgement target, but the substantive response target more often, and that number is coming up. Albeit we do need to note that it's not wholly within our control as a service as to when we can get those substantive responses out. But the committee did ask last time that we start providing a reason for delay on the spreadsheet, so we'll do that moving forward. That will be in place for the next quarter report. You'll also see in the sort of trends and themes under 4.4 that I've put the numbers against the type of complaints again, which was something that the committee asked for. So you see the big chunk disrespect is up at 36. I'm sorry, it's been overwritten by the key itself, but you can hopefully just make out the other figures 21, 8, 9, 7, 4 as you go around the pie chart. And that's largely it, Chair. I think last time we agreed that we'd do an annual summary for the next meeting. So just a retrospective look at 24-25, which I'm happy to do. But if the committee have any observations or wish to see the ongoing quarterly reports in a different format or focusing on different things, then just let me know and we can action that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. we'll pick this one up under P1 report, because P1 looked at that in the last, between the last meeting and this one. But any comments or thoughts on the report? Firstly, perhaps on the content, and then secondly on the format from anyone. Hugh?
Chair, I haven't seen the report, so I'm going to embarrass myself, but I want to ask the question. When the lead officer gives his report, I wait patiently for 2 incidents that have come up at 2 different full councils, and yet, has it been reported and back to us yet, the outcomes? We had 2 serious ones. I reported one of one individual, and I had a stranger sitting by me who happened to be an officer, and that person highlighted to me what was happening, and I then said, right, well, half time, I'll go and see the officer, which I did, but he was already aware of what was going on. And I would love to know what the outcome of it was. And then at our next full council, we had another situation with the councillor, with the upset with a protester. We actually had it in our local paper, a picture of the incident. And I wondered what has
We don't want
happened.
to talk about.
Sorry?
Keep them anonymous if you can.
Well, I have named people.
No.
But I'm very, very bitter over this because in my situation, way back years ago, I was spread everywhere. Why the secrecy of misbehavior? I didn't misbehave, I was done.
Okay, let me ask the officers for a comment on that. David?
Yeah, of course, Chair. I think I know the 2 incidents that Councillor Davies is referring to. The first one didn't come in as a formal complaint. It was just a kind of a verbal observation that was dealt with at the time on the day via the group leader. So some advice and guidance was given, and the behaviour that had been observed was rectified as a result of that intervention. The second incident that has come in as a formal complaint, but came in after the report was written. So you will see that on the next summary.
Yeah.
This one's Hugh?
Well, the only other issue, Chair, is what amazed me that people in their own parties were unaware of the behaviour of certain people. And sitting by them, they weren't aware. So what is going on here? To me, the standards is well, shouldn't be called standards because we're not putting any weight on people. We're just saying don't do it again or whatever. But in one instance, the first instance, an MP resigned over a similar situation, and he was turned in by his own people. And I really don't know why we haven't acted. I know we don't want bad publicity for the new council, but we can't wash things underneath the carpet all the time. If you're misbehaving in your body for a councillor, you should carry that sword and do the job well, not abuse it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. Yeah, I certainly don't think we should be sweeping things under the carpet in any shape or form, and I'm sure we aren't. Having said that, the reason for that is that people will be aware these incidents are raised and are dealt with. If there aren't any coming out, they won't know whether there are any at all. So it's quite crucial to our, if you like, responsibility, our power as a standards committee, that people see that these things, when they happen, they're brought out. If there's a 0 on these complaint forms, then I think I'd be considerably worried about the situation. However, but taking David's comment, if they haven't come through a formal process, they won't be in here. But maybe, and I think there's a point being made on more than one occasion, that we need to look at the training side or just communication side or or whatever it is, to revisit the responsibilities that people have, and possibly through the leaders of the individual parties to start with. But I'll just put that forward and seek officers' views on that.
I think that's an accurate summary, Chair. Yeah, if it didn't come forward as a formal complaint, then it wouldn't feature on on the spreadsheet or on the report. The way we deal in terms of our adopted process and procedures is to try to reach a resolution, and formal resolution, through a local resolution without the need for informal investigation every time. So that's our adopted process, and that's what we'll try to do whenever possible. In respect of the follow-up point, yeah, training in terms of standards and codes of conduct is on the agenda, and we'll be rolling that out, and we'll form the committee as to what the plans are in terms of the wider training program for members moving forward.
Okay, so you have the training plan program, what it is in mind. When would we have that coming forward to this committee? Would it be the next meeting?
Sorry, apologies, Chair. Just in terms of we've obviously got the member development group who lead on the training for members, and that meets on a quarterly basis. So we can certainly bring a report to this committee in terms of the content and the training that the group have advised for the authority to focus on.
In terms of the standards, obviously.
Yeah, we can pick out standards elements of that, those group discussions, yeah.
Would that quarterly meeting be held before our next meeting? Okay, so can that come back to the next meeting? Practically? Okay, thank you.
This is meant to be a slightly more light-hearted point, but I can see complaints coming in if we talk about Minehead Parish Council. It's our town. Outside this room, we'll pick it up somewhere.
So technical point needs to be amended, is that
Appendix.
right? Okay. So what would you like to be done?
Well, Minehead Town Council, not Minehead Parish Council, because they'll get twitchy.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be a main point of discussion, I'm sure. It's no, I didn't have my tongue in my cheek at that point. I assure you. Thank you, Francis. David.
Yes, I'm sorry for jumping the gun earlier, but coming back to this point now, there were two things. In terms of training, and you were talking about, David was talking about training for members. You know, a lot of these complaints are against town and parish councillors, and I just wonder, you know, SALT will offer a lot of training, but just strikes me that there's a need. When you see the spread, it's really useful to have that pie chart of, you know, to show how the breakdown of complaints. But, you know, there are things that stand out: are disrespect, bringing into disrepute, bringing council into disrepute, misuse of position as a councillor, not declaring interest. You know, these are basic things that parish and town councillors ought to be aware of. And I just wonder whether a quick note around to chairs of parish councils to read out at meetings, just to remind councillors of their responsibilities in terms of behaviour and, you know, not disclosing interest, what has to be disclosed. And you know, it's fair to say I think the majority of these complaints were against parish and town councils rather than
Thank you, David.
and things about media policies. There were a lot of mentions about about the media policies. I think they all related to one council, probably to the same incident. But, and there was also a mention that the council's media policy needed to be updated. So is there a message to go out to councils about media policies? And do parish councils have media policies or town councils? I don't think we have one in Kingston St Mary. I didn't realise. So.
Okay, so there's a couple of points there. One is about the awareness, and most of them coming from.
Just reminding, so rather necessarily, it may be that in cases where people have been found, to be in default, that a training need is identified, which can be provided through whatever means, SALC or whoever. But just a sort of general reminder note to councils saying, with these, looking at these the stats, the majority of complaints are coming through around these areas. And to be fair, I think one of the reasons that we asked for this data in the first instance was to identify training needs and identify themes and areas that needed to be addressed. And I just think we should follow up on that. More so probably with town and parish councils, than because they probably haven't, they haven't had this environment where there is a standards committee, if I'm correct, that we weren't looking at town and parish councils or city councils before. Now that we are, we ought to be using the information we're getting to feed back to them, to remind them what their responsibilities are.
If I take the second one first, so that incident where the council was found not to adhere to the media policy, that was the media policy of the town council in question. So I think the bigger town councils will have them. The smaller parish councils not. Yeah. But as everyone knows, social media is a part of everyday life, and some councillors use it for different purposes, and some councillors use it inappropriately and don't necessarily separate that private and in councillor life. So that's why the bigger councils do tend to have them. In respect of the second point around, or your first point, my second point around training, we'll let me commit to reaching out to SALC to see. We tend to always focus training on the election cycle. So shortly after, we'd introduce a sort of training offer to our town and parish councils. That was a little bit hit and miss across the old county, because it tended to be led at district level, because that's where the responsibility for the town and parish councillors lay. So it was a little bit hit and miss, but because we've now got a 5-year cycle for this term, we've got that extra year. It's probably pertinent to kind of revisit that mid-term. So let me commit to reaching out to SALC and see what we can do collaboratively in terms of a training programme for our town and parish councils, or the offer that we can make.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair, but you've got a hand up online from Paul Hooper.
I can't actually see it, but
John, I was just going to say, I know I'm going to be like a cracked record, but if you are going to do information round to town and parish councils, you do need to do a brief to parish meetings as well, of which there are 21 as we know, in the county. And with the greatest respect, it's no good going through SALC, because majority of the parish meetings are not members of SALC. It needs to come from Somerset Council. Sorry to be a broken record, but I think if we're trying to get everybody together, we need to cover everybody.
Thank you, Paul. I think your hand may be behind a drop down menu thing. But thank you for raising that, Stephanie. I'll come back to David on that situation. What is our jurisdiction around parish meetings?
Parish meetings aren't required to have adopted codes of conduct, so code of conduct training is not relevant to them. I don't think there's anything to stop us extending the invitation to any training that we offer, but we have no oversight or remit as a committee in terms of the behaviour of members of parish meetings because they're not bound by a code of conduct.
Okay, well, that seems a sort of fair compromise, Paul, then that we include them in the correspondence, even though we have no jurisdiction over them, because it's good practice to be so.
I think that would be much appreciated by them as well, because and I was a chair for nearly 10 years, we just felt that we were floundering with nothing, no support at all.
Thank you, Paul, excuse me. We'll bring that forward and I think the P1 group when we next meet, I think, which you're a member of, Paul. I think I'm switched off when I was starting the opening remarks. All I did was to ask David Clark to reply to David Strip's two comments. One about the reminder for town and country parish councils, town and city rather, and the other was on the media plans, which David then followed up with the microphone on. Does that cover that, Stefan? Did you? Thank you. I'll get this microphone bit sorted out probably in the next 4 or 5 years. Done it again. Any other comments then about the process or the format of the information that's in there on David's report? And thank you very much for doing the report, David. I just had one query. I think it was clarification. I think I've got it right, but where there are a number which are given us a little suffix of A, B, or C, that's from the same person but different nature of complaint. I'm looking particularly at the ones that are on the last sheet you sent through. There's a number 24/54A, B, and C.
Not necessarily from the same person, Chair, but about the same incident. So we have multiple complaints about the same incident and the same subject councillor.
Okay, thank you for that. If there are no other comments, then thank you, David, for this. I think you'll see when we get to the report of the individual priority groups, and I'll do P1 that we've got a work in progress on this situation, and I think we can try and improve the level of the information or look to what we can do on that, complete without ignoring the extra administration that might be involved in producing it. So thank you, David. Let's move on to item 8, which is the working group updates. I will cover P1, the priority group 1. I'll just read through the information that everybody has. But the review of the monitoring officer's arrangement for the investigation of the allegations of breach of code of conduct by members and cooperative members, and to make appropriate changes. So the findings of that group, which involved Paul Hooper, Francis Nicholson, David Strip, and myself, who recommend that a feedback form, paper or online, should be sent to all parties when each complaint is concluded, focusing on the process rather than the result. We've drafted the feedback form and it says see next page, but I'm not sure whether it is included with the documents, and I'm not unhappy about that because it says work in progress, and I'll perhaps come back to that a little later on. And secondly, test driving the process using individual experience, and that was something that David Strip was going to do. And David will pick that up in our next meeting, unless you want to feedback any comments now.
No, the test that I did was one specific case that I was involved with. I think it's probably best to report back when we
next
report
meeting.
back on the form itself.
Okay, fine, that's fine. The reason for that is just reminding people is that before we launched the process, we were aiming to test drive the process itself, and there was never an occasion or appropriate occasion for us to do that. So David has been looking at himself. We then moved on to the media protocol review, and David Clark, the monitoring officer, fed back eventually that the process was still new and the documents are still fit for purpose, which will bring me back to my initial comment that when we produced the feedback form, I think that's where we are in both these situations, that we're aware of areas where we might need to add information, but it's still work in progress. Is that a fair reflection, David and Paul? Paul, are you happy with that? And
Yeah,
Francis?
I am. Thank you. Yeah.
And I think
Form was sent to the officers. Was there any feedback from them in terms of whether this concept is the right thing to do, to get feedback from complainants after after their complaint has been resolved one way or the other? Is it something that you would support, or is it?
With all similar processes, you're always going to end up with one party unhappy and one party less unhappy with the outcome. So there is an inherent issue with asking for feedback if they haven't got the outcome they
Yes, no, but
wanted.
this is specifically feedback about the process.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's probably going to generate other comments as well, but it makes it clear that it's specifically about the process and the questions are specifically.
Yeah,
process driven.
so from my perspective, I saw the email correspondence going back and forth, and I think it was Councillor Nixon responded in quite some detail about the content. So I was anticipating a revised form in response to those comments. If you want me to provide, or myself or Scott to provide any comments on the original draft form, then happy to do so.
Whether you feel that would be useful for you.
I think customer consultation and customer feedback is always useful.
Yeah.
You know, it's a really useful piece of information and tool to help us improve our processes. I think we just need to be crystal clear on what we're asking for feedback on.
Yeah. Can I just, Chair, just ask one thing? I think the crux of Councillor Nicholson's comments were that we don't want to be repeating or creating a lot of extra work. And if we've got the information somewhere in the system that can be dragged out, then that's the easiest. But it's then understanding the system and what can be dragged out of the system. So if I review it in light of Councillor Nicholson's comments and send it back to you, then you can suggest what can be taken from the system, what can't, and what questions actually need to be asked of the complainants.
So, yeah, thanks, Chair. I just refer you to my earlier reports on the Code of Conduct's complaints and what that monitors in terms of acknowledgement, how often we're meeting that acknowledgement target, how often we're meeting that substantive response target. So that's the kind of information that we've already got, which I think was covered in the original draft, and hence the comment about, if we've already got the information, why are we seeking it again? But yeah, happy to provide a more fulsome response. If you want to do a revision and send the revised draft, then we can be happy.
I think the other thing that was on the agenda as well for the group was to look at the similar feedback from officers. And I think my response there was that all that information is kept. The only thing I think is important from that perspective is to capture feedback. And you did say that you're going to add reasons for delays into the spreadsheet, but there might be space there for officers that have been working on a case to feedback immediately, perhaps improvements to the system, to the process, or if there's anything that stands out for them in terms of having dealt with this, how the time can be reduced, how we can get answers and responses quicker, or any learning points, sort of needs to be captured at the time. So that,
David?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things we're already aware of in terms of making it easier to complain. I know that sounds like a bit of a misnomer, but just in terms of our complaint form, for example, that's editable if you've got the right software. If you haven't got the right software, it's not very editable. You can't submit that form as an online form through the website. So it's those kind of changes we're looking to implement to make access easier for complainants. At the moment, it's the right thing to do, but I do feel, people will submit a complaint on email and we immediately ask them to complete the form, and just so that we ensure that we capture all the correct details and reflecting it back as to making people aware of what we can and can't do and what the remit of the standards regime is, and what the sanctions of the standards regime is, and what we're measuring against, i.e. adherence to the code of conduct and when they're acting in their role as an elected member. But yeah, I think we can. There's technology available to make that easier, make that process smoother, and that can feed into automatic acknowledgements and responses and better monitoring of response rates as well.
Thank you, David. Any other comments or questions on this one? Just to pull that together, and I think if the P1 group will pick this up before the next meeting. And I think just to pick up some of the key points that were there, we really would like to focus on the process, bearing in mind that sometimes it's difficult for people to detach themselves from that when they perhaps had a result one way or the other. That's the first thing. Secondly, to see whether we picked up all the qualitative aspects of that process. And I think we need to have feedback for that from both officers and let's call them customers for the moment, for shorthand. But I think once we've done that, then compare that with where we are already and where David's report we feel we could enhance or not, as the case may be. And I think the same applies for the media protocol review in terms of, and we have a watching brief to keep an eye on those things continuously. So there's no reason to feel that we've got to do it annually, but just on a continuous process. When we've got something to say, I think we bring it forward at that point. So we're happy with that as a sort of a summary of where we got to, the P1 members. Okay, thank you. Well, shall we move on to the feedback? I think this is you, Francis, from P2.
Sorry, the group met twice. We touched on both of the issues that we raised in our first meeting, went away for first thinking, had talked to officers, also looked at other councils, some of which have changed since the last time we looked at them, interestingly. So it's obviously something that does move elsewhere. And we came to the conclusion that those few councils which had not adopted the Somerset Council Code were unlikely to change their minds. And that therefore, at the moment, we didn't think that any further action on that would be appropriate at this stage. Come the next quadrennium after this quinquennium, it may be different, but I think at this stage they've made their decisions. Is that a fair summary? Yep. And the other one was, and following on from that when resources allow, there might be time, it might be appropriate to look at the sort of the pattern over the years of the complaints that city, town and parish councils have, and talk in terms of training alongside SORC or with SORC or in cooperation or in some other. Let's not repeat what each other are doing, but this council provides the monitoring officer role for them rather than SORC. So I don't think it's appropriate just to say, oh, SORC can do it all. Quite apart from whether not all the parish councils in my patch, for example, are members of SORC. So some of them approve of SORC and some of them don't, So that is that also? Yeah, and the last thing was actually David Clark, very kindly sent round to us the sad case of the large fine for inadvertent overlooking. And that it would perhaps be no harm when we are communicating with city, town and parish councils on anything, just to draw their attention to that, just to concentrate minds a bit. That was, I think, also, is that fair, Alan? Yeah. So that was all on the question of which code of conduct. The other one was the vexed question of who should sit on a hearing subcommittee. And we went around this a number of times and thought that with the size of committee we have, which works with the number of the proportions of members that we've got, and so on and so on and so forth, we're pretty tight on finding people who are conveniently available for hearing subcommittees. And that it might be helpful to widen the pool to all members of this committee. But we wanted to bring back, for the input both of other members of the committee and officers, the alternatives in the last point. That the Standards Committee should consider and accept one of the following alternatives for determining the membership of a particular hearing subcommittee. I'm sorry, you will have read this, but for those who I should have done this in order. We increasing the pool to all members, that the monitoring officer, in consultation with the chairman of the Standards Committee, should decide which particular people should be asked to sit on a hearing subcommittee, rather than it being a free for all. But the committee should consider whether, in addition to elected members, there may be one or more co-opted members, or there must be at least one co-opted member. And we wanted to bring that back here as an open question.
So I think it's time for us to have a look at those recommendations, which I won't go through again because Francis has done it very ably. But we come down to 3 on page 46, which is to look. Which is drawing people at the CDP councils to the recent case.
Our code. Think in terms of training rather than that. Should resources ever become available?
Okay, right. Sorry, I missed those, Francis. I think those could be drawn into the work that we've just already talked about in terms of the P1 situation. And the reason I make that because they're looking at how we further communicate with parish council. I think we take account of that. If you're happy, if P2 is happy with that, I think we'll obviously involve you with all your experience. And that's probably the reason why I didn't pick that up, because I was thinking in those sort of terms anyway, but only in my head.
Quick comments. Just that I was under the impression, in my ignorance, that once a code of conduct had been adopted, it was adopted on an ongoing basis. But I was reminded at our last parish council meeting that the code of conduct has to be re-adopted on an annual basis. And if that is the case, is it not sensible that there is that a missive goes round to say, when you are reviewing your code of conduct next time, consider this, consider adopting the Somerset Guide? I
think that the group felt that we had annoyed the parish, town and city councils quite enough over this, and that it was time we gave it a rest.
You happy with that, David? I think we'll be in all that we're seeking to do in terms of now moving on to a carrot approach rather than a stick that we talked about. So I won't go through again, otherwise be around that boy. Then we'll pick up these things and move on to that carrot approach. The stick's working. Sorry, we don't know whether it's working, but it's actually operating. Let's put it that way. So can I move forward with P2's agreement that to look at how we look at the recommendations, particularly under 3, because bringing you back, the P2 group suggested that we widen to include all members of the Standards Committee, and in consultation with the chairman of the Standards Committee, decide which particular people will be asked to sit on the hearing subcommittee. That's item 2 there, and 3, 2 options. In addition to elected members, there be maybe 1 or more co-opted members, or B, in addition to elected members, there must be at least 1 co-opted member. And I think and I'm seeing here from my outsider's perspective, the point of B is that there would be at least 1 co-opted member involved, and A is that there may be 1 or more. Can I take the views on how we take those recommendations from P2 forward? Brian.
Can I just ask in that, letting it down to the chair and monitoring officer to work out who it should be, what's the criterion that's meant to be applied to that? Is it equal balance of attendance over a period of time so everybody gets the equal chance, or is it appropriateness of members or area? How is it more quantified in that then?
Answer that, and then I'll hand it over to David. I think on the only case that we've had in the last year, it was down to there are a fixed number of members that should be involved. We're talking about co-opted members now, not the members, and it's down to the time scale that we have to operate to address these subcommittee hearings. Who's available? I think that might be the deciding one, but I'll hand over to Scott and David for comments on that.
I'll just flag, it's probably the most important point just to flag in terms of any recommendations on these 1 to 3. The specification relating to membership is set out in the Constitution. So subject to the views of this committee, clearly if the committee is minded to make and approve these kinds of recommendations, it would have to actually recommend them to full council, just like the committee did in terms of gifts and hospitality. But
yeah. And let's revisit it from the start again. We're looking to widen the pool available here. And that therefore, because there is only a small number of members in this group, and I think it's 3, is it, that have to be on this hearing subcommittee? 3 to 5. Well, that's it. Basically, that's what we've got. And so if we need to reach the time scale, and I can't remember it, but there is a time scale whereby we have to hold those committee meetings, then it may not be sustainable if we haven't got a wider group to respond to. I'm just revisiting the arguments in my own head while speaking here. So the question is then, as there are no more members, do we bring co-opted members in? And I think there's 2 elements to that. One, that would that bring an extra level of experience in? In other words, it'd be useful to have that. And secondly, should we do that because it makes it more sustainable? I just reiterate that we've only had 1 in the last year. And when I think we started talking about this, I was personally in a panic that we'd have 1 every month and therefore we'd be falling behind. That didn't happen. So let's go around the room, pick up any comments on the, thank you for that. Sorry, Scott, I'll come back to you.
Just a related constitutional point, which is that the Standards Committee, again, I appreciate you should all know this, but the 5 elected members are voting. The 5 co-opted members are non-voting. The proposals here would also have to draw out that point in particular, because in order to participate in a kind of hearing subcommittee, you would want the participants to have voting rights. Which is you're trying to solve the conundrum of how do you make sure you've always got 3 members.
The independent person doesn't have voting rights, voting rights at the moment. Yeah. So the change to make sure that the numbers were available would mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that they would have to have voting rights as well. Okay, thanks. That was really useful to clarify that. Alan, you're shaking your head. You haven't got your hand up, but
Sorry, I would disagree that co-opted members would need voting rights, because if you're coming to a hearing subcommittee, you've heard all the evidence, and if 3 people can't agree without a vote on whether the complaint should be upheld or dismissed, if anything, it should go through a retrial. But I would be very surprised. It would beg a belief if 3 people can't agree something as fundamental as that, Chairman.
I'll pass back to Scott.
You're forgiving the rationale for a 3-member committees. There can be scenarios where 2 people agree and 1 person does not. In the case where that 1 person doesn't have a voting right, you've effectively got 2 people with voting rights, so you've got a tied vote scenario.
Yes, I think from my perspective also, we're looking to increase the pool from which we can select the committees, these hearing subcommittees, so that is not a drag on when and where they can take place because of the availability of people. So they would need that voting right, Alan, to actually expand the pool. Otherwise, we'd have an extra person. That's another argument, and it may be a very valid one. But to expand the initial point, to expand the pool to allow us the flexibility to sustain the system as we've designed, or it's been designed, then I think they would have to have voting rights. But I would hand over to higher authority with David and.
You'll forgive me. I suppose the obvious question that will occur at council will be, what's the problem you're trying to fix? The problem that we cited in the sense of how many standards hearings have you had? What's the difficulty you're trying to overcome? So do you have multiple committees happening throughout a year? Therefore, you're struggling to find 3 out of your 5. And to which the factual answers will be, we've had 1. So I'm just trying to rehearse the arguments for why the change is required.
Brian?
Can I suggest the change isn't required?
Alan?
Thank you, Chair. I think I made the phrase at the last meeting that the man on the Clapham omnibus wants to see open democracy. And if 3 elected members are trying an elected member for misconduct, does the man on the Clapham omnibus believe that he's going to get the right outcome? If you have a co-opted member, that slightly diminishes. Whether or not the co-opted member has a voting right doesn't really matter, in my view. I would like to see it happen without voting rights, and let's see what happens.
Thank you, Alan. Let me just go out to the other 2 co-opted members. David, what's your thoughts on this?
I don't have strong feelings either way, actually, and I sort of agree with Brian. Is if it's not broken, why fix it? But if you do have a problem, I can see both sides of the arguments, and I think possibly Alan's right in his statement that having wider inputs, but not having voting rights, just sort of makes it a bit more transparent, makes it a bit more open, and actually, might bring in other, the viewpoints from people that are not directly involved in politics and stuff. So I can see both sides of the argument, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, David. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say I can see both sides, but with the greatest respect to Scott, if we're saying we have not got voting rights at the committee, that's fine. But sitting at a panel is something completely different. That's independent of the committee. And I don't see that an independent person would therefore not have a right. If they've been appointed to a panel to make a decision by this committee, they make the decision. But I don't have a view really as to whether we should have independent or not, but I'm just confused as to why it's only non-voting at the committee. A panel is something completely different.
Again, the body in question is a subcommittee of the Standards Committee. It's not a panel. It's a subcommittee.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So we seem to have two elements here. One is the voting rights. Well, I'll perhaps wind it back a bit further. I think one of the things is if we do find that we are taking Scott's point short of bodies on the ground, that won't be the time to revisit this, and it will be too late. So we need to consider, I think we need to continue to consider this. Moving on to the voting situation, that's quite a big element, I think, to move on to, and perhaps we need to consider that. But I'm minded now to take the advice of officers and to leave that one for future discussion. And the third element is what value would co-opted members bring to the panel? And I think undoubtedly they would bring value, in which case they would be non-voting members, as is the independent person at the moment, but would bring the value of their experience. And I think someone from outside members who was involved in the process, but part of this committee. And I can see advantages in its transparency from that perspective. Is that a fair assessment of where we are at the moment? So winding back, if we take the final, the last of those, which is the value of co-opted members as part of the committee, non-voting, perhaps comments from officers on the legality of that, please.
It's perfectly feasible, Chair. It will require an amendment to the constitution, but from my understanding, what I'm hearing you saying is that we'd still retain the 3 elected membership of the subcommittee, but open it up to an additional co-opted member to advise and offer observations, but without voting rights.
Yes, it doesn't answer the question of have we got the sustainability, which is where we started this from. And I'm taking Scott's comment about we're trying to crack a problem that doesn't exist. And for my view was that yes, we are, because when it does exist, it's too late to do anything about it. But I think I'm also minded now to leave that one for another day when we're further down the line. And currently, I don't think we need to spend too much more time on something that isn't an issue. So how would we take the process of a co-opted member being part of the subcommittee forward? Do we have a vote here and propose that to the next full council? Okay, so that's the proposal, that we have one co-opted member from this committee in addition to the 3 members who have voting, sorry, addition to the 3 members who have voting rights, to enlarge the committee and bring their expertise. And I think hopefully the man on the Clapham Omnibus will be one of those members. Could we have a show of hands on that, please, if you are in favour? Okay, so can we take that forward to, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, could I just add a point to that? That if you're
Yes,
going
Paul.
to change the constitution to add a non-vote, an independent person to the panel or the subcommittee, can you not also change, as you're going to make one constitution change, and put that an independent person would have a voting right at a subcommittee level?
There is an independent person already as part of the panel who is a non-voter.
Yeah.
This is an additional person. It's a part of this this committee, standards committee, one of the co-opted members would be involved as well as the three members.
And of
So,
course, what I'm
and
saying is
you're,
if you're making a change, do the change properly right through. Just a thought, if you're going to make it one change, it's easier to, I don't know what David thinks.
I'll hear from David, although I've got a view of my own on this, but I'll pass over to David, please. David Clark, thank you. PMO.
I think it refers back to the point that Scott made earlier. It's that the hearing panel is a subcommittee of the parent committee, so it inherits its rights and its voting rights from that parent committee. So if the co-opted member doesn't have voting rights on the parent committee, then they can't then have voting rights on the subcommittee. So if you were, the only way to do that would be to revert back to your earlier point of introducing voting rights to co-opted members on the standards committee, which would then allow those permissions to be inherited to the subcommittee.
Thank you, David. Paul, yes, I appreciate your point of trying to crack several walnuts with the same stone. But I think there's also an argument for that being a bridge too far and maybe taking this first stage and then moving on to that as a later point. And I'm minded to propose that as we just have done. And excuse me if that doesn't include your view. It's not that I don't disagree with it. I'm just thinking in terms of the process of moving things forward, that it would be perhaps we'd lose the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's too many analogies coming in here, actually.
I was just trying to do it all at once rather than piecemeal, which is much more efficient.
I appreciate your comment, and I think it's got a lot of validity to it, but I think maybe we would lose the first point as well as the second one. So if we could hold that for a future situation, that if you don't mind, then we'll come back to that. Not to ignore it, because I think the situation might rise later on. We find out a number of hearing subcommittees coming forward that we'll have to address this one in fairly sharp time, really. So thank you, Paul, but perhaps we'll just take one step at a time. Is that okay with everybody in terms of? Sorry, on to item 9, back on Mike again, which is the Standards Committee co-opted member. We have a space which has not been filled for an additional co-opted member, and it's a recruitment update from David, I think, or is it Scott? Whoever it is. The question I would have at the start is, have we got anybody in the pipeline that's coming forward at this stage? So over to David or Scott, who would like to pick the baton up.
I mean, I'd anticipate that there will be people who'll be interested in this, but no, we've not actively yet launched this recruitment. We wanted to take the step of obviously just sharing the proposals with the committee first, to obviously take the opportunity to take on board any views that the committee may have.
Thank you, Scott. And I think it was when we first discussed this, thought that once this was clarified, what the process would be, and all the package, the job spec, if you like, and the terms and conditions, then we may know people ourselves that we could add to the pool and put forward, not necessarily with our support, but just as interested parties. So I'll stop there and ask for comments about the way forward, which is item 9, starting with David Strip.
Do you feel that, I mean, what's the summary here suggests that there should be 5 members and 5 co-opted members. Do you feel that there's an imbalance without 5 members? Is it essential to have another co-opted member? And there are situations where councillors are busy and can't attend these meetings. You might then have a situation where you've got 5 co-opted members with 3 members. Is that? If it's written in the constitution for a reason, then we should then recruit and get another co-opted member. But
yes, I think we hadn't started from the base of reinventing the constitution or the wheel, just actually filling what the current constitution suggests we should have. But in answer to your comment, there would still be, there would be 5 non-voters and 5 voters.
Yeah.
Which I suspect, although didn't write it, it wasn't there when it's written, was the initial idea about those numbers.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Alan?
Thank you, Chairman. Disappointed this has come back because the vacancy was declared in 2022. And on the 19th of April last year, we were told that it could take up to 3 months, and 11 months later, we're still here. Page 50 of the agenda pack, and I draw members' attention to background information, item 1 there. 5 members, Somerset Council. The word "of" should be in there, please. Essential, be a Somerset resident. People living in Bath will think they're in Somerset. No, they're not. Not for this purpose anyway. So you need to reword that. I would also like this committee to set a timetable for this process, please. Chairman, if you're willing to do that.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Yes, I think we need a timescale on it. So basically clarify on page 50 that it's members from Somerset Council area. Would that be whatever the terminology is? Although Bath is in Baines, isn't it?
But you try asking a resident of Bath, do they live in Baines or in Somerset?
Well, I think if they apply, they'll be told, won't they?
Yeah, but let's make it clear before we start.
Okay, and
Just to emphasise the, where it says at least 3 should be members of city, town or parish councils, I think, this is the channel to recruit from. I think because we are now supervising town and parish councils, if you're going to recruit more, another co-opted member, that's a good route to attack. Because we want as much representation from those councils as possible.
just on that point, how many are currently members of city, town and parish councils? David is, Alan? Paul, more of a parish meeting. Paul? Just looking at how many,
I'm not on any parish or town now. But
Robin, so we need, that sort of
Robin is
reduces the
Chapman,
spec
isn't he?
somewhat, doesn't it? We need one other who has to be a member of the city, town and parish council. Okay. Right. Yeah, so we need one other has to be a member of a city, town and parish council to achieve the balance laid out in the constitution. Okay. Thank you, Alan, for raising that one. You're frowning.
Sorry, Chair, now the point's been raised, at least 3 should be members of city, town, parish councils. Is it should or should preferably be? I can't find the constitution on the website at the moment, so I can't check it.
I think if the wording should be consistent with the constitution.
Yes, yeah.
But so let's make sure that, I'm sure it is, that it's been authored by Scott or David.
If it is,
but we'll just
if
check that.
it is should be, then we need to put that in essential.
Yeah. So it moves down to the bottom.
Added to the bottom, to the essential list.
Yeah. Is that worth, are you happy with that, Scott?
It definitely should be. The question is, it should or should be preferable?
Oh, sorry.
The wording is should be.
If it should be, then it needs to be an essential. Because we only have 2 at the moment.
My feeling. But are you happy with that, Scott? Okay, so that moves down to there. Hugh?
Regarding Alan's comments about Somerset, we've only got to put the word unitary, haven't we, in the front of it? You're saying that Bath's in Somerset. We all know it's in Somerset, but it chose not to be in Somerset.
I think we can find a form of words that makes, and probably the word unitary is the one that's added in.
And the other point, Chair, I don't know whether the new members, I don't take Alan on, please shoot me. But the five of us, we're five different groups, i.e. Conservative, Independent, so on. So when we take you people on, and this is what I'm worried about all the time, is you could be a line of 3 Conservatives or 3 Liberal, you know, good luck to you. But then you're overpowering it, though you haven't got a vote, but this is your vote. And when you've got somebody as convincing as that gentleman, we will listen.
Okay, you've got 2 points there, Hugh. David, would you like to?
I was just going to say, in terms of the residency area, a resident of the Somerset Council area should address it. Yeah. So we can certainly make that change.
Sorry, I haven't got my microphone. Sorry, my personal view would be that one of the benefits of parish councils, particularly, is they are apolitical. And if someone has a good idea for the community, then everybody can pitch in together, regardless of what colour they are. And from personal view, long may that continue. And I think if we had to put a sort of a bias on that, it might change the balance. But I understand where you're coming from on that, Hugh. But I think once you come into this room, we have to suspend those political biases and work in the interests of the wider community, which in our case is the Somerset Unitary, or the parish councils, city or town councils that we may be called on to be involved with. Francis, no comments? Right. Paul, I think you've already been called to.
Yeah, no, I'm content with that.
Okay.
Oh,
Right. Sorry about that.
Well, just to say that, obviously the S in Baines does say Somerset, and Somerset in North Somerset suggests they're Somerset as well. They probably all think they're Somerset, and they're both unitaries as well, so that doesn't make it any clearer. So you probably do need to be quite clear on what you're talking about with that lot. The other thing I would say as well is you do need to get a balance of expertises and relevances from and there's also noticed there's no women involved. Maybe they're not interested in this, and good luck to them, because I can imagine that could be the case. But a wider range of input from the broader community. I don't know how you decide that, and also, as somebody said earlier, to get on with it, because it seems a bit of a long time since you've had to go look at who does the fishing for this. Somebody should get onto it.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Yeah, very valid comments there. So let's move on to the timescale, and moving backwards from the point of a person being appointed to this panel. What would be a reasonable timescale, would you think, from the officers, to say a timescale where we see the end results, i.e. somebody joining us?
And from advertisement through to appointment, you're probably talking about a minimum 2-month process.
Well, I think that would be almost lightning speed, really. But if you think you're happy to work on that basis, Scott and David, let's go with that. Everybody around the room happy with that?
Can I just say that, following up on Hugh's point about politics, does the the proposal need to make the point that this group works on a non-political basis, and the co-opted members will be expected to do the same? Just to make that point at the outset.
Chairman, I think under personal attributes, ability to use diplomacy and tact in sensitive stroke confidential situations.
I'm not sure what your point there was, Alan.
So I was just picking up on David's point about being non-political. I think that would cover it.
Right, okay. So everybody's happy with the document as such, apart from the changes we made earlier about clarifying that it was Somerset Unitary Council area. Okay, thank you very much, Scott, for doing that. So we're looking then, we're now at the end of March, so we're looking at the end of May.
Complete the process, Chair, yes.
Sorry?
Complete the advertisement, interviews, and then appointment process, yes.
Okay, right. Yeah, fine. I'm happy with that because I think to suggest that, you know, because we don't know what the demand's going to be, how many people will come into the process. But I think somewhere through that, we'll have a meeting, I think, on, is it May 27th? From memory, the next one?
May 29.
May 29th. It'd be useful to have an update at that point to see what, if you could bring one forward to see how the process is working in terms of attracting numbers. And we can review any sort of timescales at that point.
Certainly, Chairman, I would hope that we'll be taking the membership report in the sense of membership of this committee as part of the annual general meeting on the 22nd of May. So yes, we should be more than able to present them
Oh, right.
to the end of May meeting. Because that's when we should be seeking council approval to appoint the new co-operative member.
Yeah, okay. Right, thank you very much for that spirited discussion. Work programme and actions. You've got the work programme item 10 in front of you. The minutes and action plan are a standing item, which is 1 and 2. Standards Committee annual report to full council been done. We're ongoing with the review of the monitoring officer arrangements for investigations and allegations. That's P1. Media plan is ongoing as well. Model code of conduct adoption. I think P2 have said back off from that one. Towards P2. Okay. Review of the operation and effectiveness of members' code of conduct and recommend any changes. And I think that's an ongoing discussion in terms of the, I'm going to bring some things forward to the end of this in a moment or two. Perhaps I'll do that now before it slips my mind. And we need to put in for P1 to have a look at the process again of reviewing the effectiveness of the complaints process and also the communications and training aspects were there. So we'll put that down as one over the page probably, as 11. Sorry, you need to renumber this anyway. P2, you're ongoing with the review of the Standards Committee and Standards Hearing Subcommittee, as and when. And also with any learning points that comes out of that. Gifts and Hospitality Register we've done for this year. And the other elements are down there as well. What I was going to do, and I went through the other day, I was going to do this as part of the P1 reviews, and it's not on the agenda, but I just wanted to put it in your mind, is that I'd like you to everybody to look through the report, our annual report, which you've already agreed will go to full council, and look at the committee responsibilities. And they range from A to F on that page, the front page. And just and I will drop this round on an email to everybody. I think we need to review that we're covering all those things in either one of those groups, P1, 2, or 3. And what I'll do is to put against where I think we are covering them. And perhaps you could just cast your eyes over them when I send that round and see whether there's anything we've missed or we don't cover on a regular basis. Just to make sure that in terms of implementing our annual report, we've actually got everything covered. If everybody's happy with that, I can do that outside of this meeting. Okay, thank you. Then if there's no other needs to exclude the press or public, they're hammering at the door as we speak, then I formally close the meeting. And thank you all for your attendance, both online and offline. And look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting.